Bahalf America treist o imach das Ellis Island, not mediation. Agus Iad gal hwrt ysach a saloon yn sienlis yn heidiach, dan bourbon a hwrt da. Agus had rod a fwysio for America, nach mech ein tracht an for small ones, no large ones, a drink of whiskey. Caid over to the cheese, I got oil of the hard stuff for session. Agus yn siano mach an Glennacho, agus yn Pwydale. Sian Pwydale, agus yn Glenna. Oh, I can take as much as I like. You're in America now. Mach le session Pwydale, líntje soos yn Glenna. When you're chat a shin, you're chat a shin again, be a nose, can I lena. Gan an Glenna lena, la. Lynn Shane Glenna fa. We shin on bartender, you get the cock shin tua, you be at a hole and a sugar's cash alisha. Cash noon at a hole in ye. What's this for us? You're going to have a bath, aren't you? Well, since Galen of Holmea or Master Plain.
Diet Theorog of Feedingach, Nachrev Omega. Clark was a political nationalist, but the 1913 lockout stirred many. Clark.
Nothing I know of during my whole career can match the downright inhuman savagery that was witnessed recently in the streets and some of the homes of our city.
But still, Liberty Hall was an uneasy halfway house for the political nationalist.
Larkin's people for some time past have been making war on the Irish volunteers. I think this is largely inspired by a disgruntled fellow named O'Casey.
But 3 months later, England was at war, and Clark called a meeting which included himself, Pearse, Griffith, and Connolly. Sean T. O'Kelly remembers the occasion.
And that meeting was held in the library of the Gaelic League, 25 Parnell Square, a room which afterwards became my office when I was elected in October 1915 to be General Secretary of the Gaelic League. This was a year before that, September 1914. And there, when Tom Clark asked me, would I attend a meeting, I asked him about the war and to discuss the meeting, to discuss what we would do during the war. And where Tom Clark had made up his mind to advocate that we should make an effort to liberate Ireland during the war, I asked him, who did he propose to invite to that meeting? And so far as I can remember now, and I think I can remember all the names of all who were present at that meeting, Sean McDermott, of course, assisting Tom Clark, and Padraig Pearse, Thomas McDonough, Joe Plunkett, Arthur Griffith, James Connolly, William O'Brien of the Labour Party, Sean McGarry, a man named Tobin, who was held important office. I think he was a member of the Supreme Council of the IRB. Tobin, I don't remember his Christian name. He was foreman in the garage of Thompson's. Arthur Griffith, did I mention him already? Arthur Griffith and myself. That was, as far as I remember, all who were present at that meeting. And that meeting decided that there would be a rising. After long discussion, we were there for 3 or 4 hours.
The work of a year and a half brought them all the uncertainty of Easter Sunday. Mrs. Tom Clark was told to close the shop at 1 o'clock.
I closed up anyhow at 1 o'clock, assuming that the rising would go on anyhow. And I waited to hear the sound of shots and heard nothing. And then the next thing was I saw my husband coming up the avenue with 2 men with him, Tommy O'Connor and Sean McGarry. And he came in, and it was the only time in his life I ever saw him depressed. He was in a very terrible state of depression. And he told me at the meeting at Liberty Hall, he fought rings round for them to start on 4 o'clock on a Monday and not to wait till the next day. Their decision was to wait till next day and send out orders for the volunteers not to demobilise. And they thought they'd be able to overtake McNair's messengers. He said they won't, but if we go out this evening, the country will hear that Dublin is out and they'll carry out their original orders. But he was outvoted on the thing. He was a bit depressed about that. He couldn't eat, he couldn't do anything. Well, then, fearing there might be a raid during the night, the house we were living in at the time had rooms on both sides of the hallway, you see. And we decided that if a knock came to the door, I was to say who's there. If it was military, I was to open the door and say nothing. They would hear that, you see. Tom was in that room with a pistol. McGarry was in that room with a pistol. And John McGarry was up the stairs with a pistol. And I had a pistol. And if it was the military, we were going to fight to a finish. A knock came to the door and we were all got into position and everything ready and all keyed up, you see. And the next thing, who walked in was an old man from Canada Road to protest against Tom Clark going out after all he did for Ireland, to go out now to be killed and tried to prevail on him not to go, you see. So the rest of the night passed without thing.
But the rising was on, and the following day Clark said goodbye to his wife.
Just goodbye. You see, you know, when you read up to the point that you daren't break down, you must make your goodbyes as casual as is possible. You see, you understand that. And that's what it was, goodbye. I don't know whether we even shook hands. And of course, I had great hopes when the rising was continuing on the week, but I didn't ever really see that he'd come through, I must say.
On the Thursday evening, he called me and said that I had to cross O'Connell Street to the presbytery, Marlborough Street Presbytery, to bring back a priest. And I knew that just some hours before, or the afternoon before, that James Connolly had appeared out at the door and he had got a bullet into his leg, and I knew that there were neither flies nor anything else going up and down O'Connell Street at the time. I think I nearly began to cry. I remember I was shuddering at the idea of it, and then I looked up at Tom Clark and I saw the eyes, and I said, well, I can't show funk in front of him, so I said yes, I'd go.
Eamon Dorr, a medical student, was also in the GPO.
On Friday evening, Sean saw me. I was, after coming away from a window where I was with a few others, including a very great friend of mine called Joe Dunn. I mentioned Joe Dunn because Joe was an exceptional character and was very good to me in many ways. But Sean saw me and he said, we're going upstairs for something to eat. And he said, come on with us. And we went upstairs to the second story, went into a room, and 5 of us sat down to that meal. Tom Clark, Sean McDermott, Dermot Lynch, Sean McGarry, and myself. I was the boy. They were all much older. And Clark was still in good humour, could still see his face. Sean was just solemn himself, in a sense. He often looked like that. Even in ordinary days, before ever there was a rising, Sean had that peculiar way that he could look ponks, quiet. McGarry was good-humoured. Father Flanagan, one of the priests that had come in to attend to the dying, he came in the door, and McGarry looked up and he saw him, and he turned and he said to him, Father, he said, would we be damned if we had eaten a Friday? It was a Friday. And Father Flanagan turned and he says, why, Sean? He says, we'll take a chance on it. So they all laughed. And in the course of conversation when the meal was nearly over. The post office was, of course, completely on fire at the time. It hadn't come quite down to our room, but it was all around us. So I asked Tom Clark, I said, what would you do if we won? Well, he said, we won't win this time. And I said, if we won, what would you do? Well, he said, I hope you won't be disappointed. But I still persisted, and I said to him, but what would you do if we did win? He said, I'd get a small cottage with a big wall round it, and I'd grow flowers.
He loved the garden, and every minute. In fact, in the summer times, most of our meals were out in the garden. That maybe been so long locked up in cells, you see, that he loved the open air.
We were all the women were called together, and we were told that we were being sent out of the post office. I needn't tell you, none of us wanted to go because we knew what it meant. But then we said, well, we better do as we're told if men feel that they can fight better. And well, it's not good to have women hanging around them. And we went out, and the last person I shook hands with, the last man I saw was Tom Clark. And he took my hand and he said, if you see my wife, tell her. And then he stopped him and tell her the men were wonderful to death. And then he stopped, and I knew it was end. He was going to say, but he pulled himself up and he didn't say it.
But it was the end. Tom divined.
Hundreds of us were herded up towards Rotunda, and there we slept, a lot of us, on the